Hi, I'm James, and this is Action and Adventure Tips, the place where you, the content creator, can come to learn about things to make your content more realistic so you avoid those dreaded bad reviews. Today's topic, private investigations. Many of you have probably read PI books, or you've watched many PI shows such as Remington Steele or Moonlighting or something like that, or Magnum PI even. But do you really know what a private investigator does? Most of the shows that I've seen, and I don't watch a lot of television, have this sort of a general we can do everything type private investigation. And there are very few agencies that actually do that. As a matter of fact, most private investigative agencies kind of focus in on one thing or another, or maybe they have a couple of specialties. Now, there are three main types of investigations that PIs are involved in. The first type, and the most dominant, are civil investigations. These are matters that are headed towards civil court and are usually resolved out of court. The second type is the criminal investigation. These are matters that somebody may wind up going to jail on. And the third type is what I call a mix, where you have both civil and criminal investigations taking place within the same agency. Now, I am a Washington State licensed private investigator. My specialty is actually in financial investigations. I do the mix, where in some cases I have criminal cases, and in others they are purely civil. I've had cases that have gone into federal court, and I have cases that have gone into state court. So that's what I do. But let's break this down real quickly into the different types. On the civil side, you have a whole bunch. For example, on a financial investigator. In civil financial investigations, what we're looking at normally, in my case anyhow, is fraud or issues related to lawsuits, such as, I think my business partner is kind of ripping me off. Is that going to be criminal or is that going to be civil? It all depends on what the client wants. As a licensed private investigator, I am unable to run to the police if I uncover crime, because of the law saying that I only can do so if I'm given authority. And where can I get that authority? Well, either from the client, if the law requires it, or if I'm subpoenaed. And no law requires me to report a crime in Washington State, which can be frustrating at times. So that's the first type. Probably the most common type you're used to is the surveillance investigator, the person going out there who's either doing a fixed surveillance on a subject to see if they're, possibly doing work that they shouldn't be doing, like lifting bags of concrete when they're supposedly out on a back injury claim. Or they could be chasing down spouses or business partners or whatever, in a moving surveillance. That means using vehicles and switching cars, so they might have 2 or 3 cars operating at the same time. Some PIs specialize in what are called locates. That means finding people. That could either be for process service, or maybe somebody died and left somebody some money and nobody knows where they went. I did one case where a girl was adopted and she knew she had some family in Florida. They were happy to hear about her. So sometimes that's a really good thing. Some PIs are involved in executive protection. Yes, they are the guys in the suits standing around the rich guy. Matter of fact, I think Ryan Reynolds did a great job portraying an executive protection PI in the movie The Hitman's Bodyguard. Some are involved in accident reconstruction, be it automobile, aviation, or even maritime investigations. If a boat runs into a wharf or something like that, they'll go out and conduct the investigation. Some do canine services, and it's not just the big old German Shepherd snarling at the gate. I know one guy who actually runs a beagle and checks for bed bugs in hotels, which I thought was pretty interesting. I wish I had had one when I was walking the Camino. Some PIs do workplace investigations. They go in and find out, did so-and-so say such and such a thing? And if so, what kind of ramifications are dealt with in that matter? Usually you'll see a lot of that taking place not just in corporations, but also in governments, where private investigators are brought in to conduct investigations on city employees, such as police chiefs, or in the case that I worked on, a city manager. And he wound up getting convicted in a criminal court, which was pretty unique. Others do what are called process serving. You're basically going to be given a nice little subpoena to show up in court, or you're being divorced type thing. If you've ever been served papers, that's typically done by a PI or a licensed process server in some places. and technically speaking, I believe most states allow anybody to serve anybody as long as they are not involved in the lawsuit. So you've got that type. Police misconduct, that's a big one. You have many PIs who actually will be brought in to look at police officer misconduct, be it a shooting, an arrest, or even just bad behavior with citizens. Witness interviewing is a big one. This is really big in almost every field. Basically, you're going out and you're interviewing. And if you're interviewing people generally for purposes of an investigation, generally you're required to be licensed by the state if your state has a PI licensing law. So don't just think that you can be a PI just by going out there and doing it. Nor can you just have anybody be a PI in your novels. Many states, like California, for example, have very strict PI licensing laws, and we'll be getting into that in another video. What about, what other types of civil investigations can take place? I mean, there are many. Two other types of civil investigations are polygraph testing. Believe it or not, some states you have to be a licensed PI to be a polygraph tester, and public records searches. Now, almost everybody I know in the PI field does public records searches, especially if you're doing asset searches. Does the person own a boat? Does the person own a plane? Does the person have a car? Does the person have property? Do they have businesses that are licensed in the state? That kind of a thing. I'm always looking for that kind of stuff. Now, moving into the criminal side, you've got three main types of criminal investigations that I like to consider. The first one is for criminal defense. That's where a defense attorney usually hires somebody, licensed PI, to go out and conduct the actual investigation to find out what happened so that they can best represent their client in court and hopefully, if they're innocent, get them off. Generally speaking, though, another thing is that the police have to follow the law, and if they're not following the law and the PI uncovers it, then the person will get off on what people call a technicality. If the police officer does their job properly, there are very few technicalities that need to be overcome. I do financial investigations. As I mentioned, I do both civil and criminal, as it's a mix. But when I'm doing, when somebody's doing a financial investigation for criminal matters, it's usually fraud related. And when I'm talking fraud, I'm talking people stealing from a business or people stealing from the elderly. There is a lot of elder abuse and a lot of elder fraud out there. I've had many elder fraud cases, and I just can't stand to see what's happening to old people as they're getting ripped off by people who should be their friends or family. Go figure. So the other one is retail organized crime. There are a lot of PIs who really specialize in this kind of a thing, where they actually try to track down, all the organized crime that's committing retail theft. You may have heard about all these big break-ins and everything, but generally speaking, there's one group of people that are organized enough that actually do it. I won't go into it in this video. If you want to learn more, ask somebody involved in it. Now, what about those that are in the mixed field? There are a number. Once again, the financial investigator. We operate in both sides, civil and criminal. Another one that operates in both sides is digital forensics. You may know it as computer forensics, or but they're a lot more. They actually get into cell phones, they get into photographs. I mean, they've got all sorts of tricks. I've worked several cases with computer forensics experts or digital forensics experts where they've gone into both the cell phones and the computers. And we've had convictions from those in, both federal and state law courts. Let's see, other ones are insurance. You'll see people doing insurance investigations, which involve surveillance, and if somebody's committing fraud for insurance purposes, those will usually wind up in the criminal court system. But many times it will not. Usually it'll be a civil matter. There are wrongful death cases. Who caused this death? Yeah, and I've had a friend who did one on an insurance matter. He wrote about it in a novel, and what happens in this case. Another one is the asset searches. That's where you're basically looking to find out who owns what. There are many ways of doing that. I won't get into it, but the whole idea here is to identify exactly what kind of assets are held by a party, either if it's for a criminal case or a civil case. There are some PIs who specialize in crime scene investigations, where they will go back to the crime scene and investigate it. Sometimes they're hired by state agencies, and when I say a state agency, I'm referring to a local police department or a local sheriff's office or even the state police to conduct the investigation. Some are involved in intellectual property and copyright violations. As a patent holder, I'm always taking a look at my own patents and finding out, oh, is somebody ripping me off? And same thing as a novelist, and you as a novelist or a content creator should be fully aware of the IP and copyright investigator types. Go seek them out. You're going to want to know them. You're going to be your buddy, because the last thing you need is to have the work that you created being out there for everybody else to read or watch or play for free. I mean, let's face it, you spend a lot of time and effort not only in writing that content or creating that content, but in the education that was necessary to do that. You can also have forensic statement analysis, somebody who's looking at signatures and things like that. Many of these cases are pretty much considered fraudulent, but they will usually wind up in the civil courts rather than in the criminal courts, although some do wind up in the criminal courts. And finally, arson. This is, you can have arson investigators out there who work for insurance companies, and they can make a determination, and sometimes those two will wind up in the criminal court system. I hope all this information has been useful. We're going to be having an entire series on private investigators, so if there's any particular one that you'd like to know more of sooner, put it in the comments below, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, check me out at jamespeet.com. Stay safe out there.